Hey, welcome to today's art journal video. The spread we are going to create is from the Stamperia paper pads called Magic Forest. This by far is one of the most beautiful sets that have been put out by them. I think everyone fell in love with this magical fairy or elf. We are going to use her on the spread along with some stone pillars for the corners. We are also going to use a gel plate to create the background and stamp it onto the journal pages. All the other supplies you see here on the table were all inspired by these pages. Choosing the colors, textures, and stencils ahead of time can really help as a warm-up to start creating. I picked out 3 stencils that I felt would go with the papers. A Gothic style font and this grungy stone will tie in well, adding a medieval aged feel. This Celtic knot circle will be placed behind our girl. Because this stencil is a mask, we will use a gel plate to stamp this design onto the journal page. Here is my test page for the background using the gel plate. You can see here how the gold design is the actual stencil design, not gold added through the cutout openings. This is a really fun technique, creating something on the gel plate, then stamping it into the journal. I also really love the organic, distressed, imperfect look you can get with a gel plate. First, place a stencil mask onto the gel plate. We will be working backwards for the layers. To create this Celtic knot design in gold, we need to first mask off the area, then add any details, and lastly, apply the background color. To make this stencil stand out more, let's add some shading using some soft pastels. By adding the shading after the stencil mask but before the background color, this pastel will sit in between. You will see next how it looks when I flip the gel plate to see the other side. I have 2 colors I'm going to use for the background. This is a chalk paint from Paper Artsy. It dries very fast, so I like using it on the gel plate since you need to wait for the paint to dry before adding the next layer. Keep a piece of paper next to your plate to roll off any excess paint, and make sure to really get into those stencil openings. also add a little bit more detail by using a stamp to basically remove paint from some areas, leaving the stamp design open for the next color. It took me a while to get the hang of thinking backwards when doing a gel print. Remove the stencil mask and let this layer dry before you apply the next color. If you want to check the progress of your gel print, flip it over to see the underside because this is what it will look like face up on your journal pages. It's always handy to keep your gel plates on an acrylic plate. Once the first layer of paint is dry, let's add the next layer, which is the gold color for the Celtic knot and the stamped script. Because we are adding the gold after or behind the green-blue color, it will only show through these open areas. With each layer of paint, it's important to not have too much paint or too little paint. With practice, you will find the right amount that works for your gel prints. Leave the paint to dry again. I forgot to shift the gel plate to the edge of the acrylic block so that it will fit in a journal, so I just carefully removed and repositioned it. If you are using one too, make sure the edge of the gel plate sits at the edge of the block. Okay, so now it's time to stamp or transfer the gel print into our journal page to create the background. You can use either paint or matte medium as the transfer medium. I chose paint that is the same color as the journal paper. Apply your last layer of paint or matte medium to the gel plate, but this time do not let it dry. This is the layer that needs to dry on the journal page, essentially gluing down the background we created. Flip over the gel plate and line up where you want the background to be on the page. I did not line up mine properly at first, but luckily I didn't press it down very much and I was able to shift the plate over. It's important that the entire plate adheres to the journal page so the gel print will transfer completely. A heavy book on top works well as well. Let's get to work on the background for the other page. It's the exact same steps as the first, just a different placement of stencils. Remember that this design will be flipped when transferred. I wanted the stencils to be on the left side, so I placed it on the right side of the plate. Remember, you can always flip the gel plate over to see the progress of your layering. Both gel plates have had some time to dry, so let's see how well the print will transfer. Look how well everything cleanly transferred. This other side, however, did not. I seem to have a harder time with this plate and had some areas that would not transfer. This is totally fine, and we'll just add some distressed looking areas that we can work with. By applying some of the same colors of paint used earlier, we can blend in these areas where the paper is still exposed. You won't even tell that it wasn't transferred. I used a paintbrush and then a sponge to further blend and feather out the paint. Now let's cut out some images from the Stamperia papers. I like to fussy cut them out, but if you don't like fussy cutting, tearing them out works well. You will just have a more distressed paper edge than a clean cutout. I teared out the page with the magical elf, then chose 2 other papers that have some stone pillars and statues to use for the corners of the journal page. I absolutely love these statues. This corner piece will work great on our page. I did add some dark archival ink to the edges of the papers just to add a little bit of a shadow. This really makes them pop from the pages. Once you have cut or teared out your images, glue them down to the pages. I always use a combination of a glue stick and some liquid glue. I hate when the glue oozes out from under the papers, especially if the background is done with a non-permanent medium. So I use the glue stick to ensure the edges of the paper stick down with the reinforcement of the strong liquid glue applied only to the center of the papers. Moving along now to my favorite part of art journaling, which is adding textures. Here I am using an opaque matte texture paste from Ranger. There are many different brands of texture, or also known as modeling paste, to choose from that create different effects. Apply the paste through the stencil randomly on the pages. The cool thing about Ranger's texture paste, with the exception of the gloss versions, is that it absorbs color after it dries. Most other brands may absorb a bit, but I found they can also resist the color. Both are perfectly fine, it just depends on the look you want to achieve. Distress oxide sprays work great when applied with a brush. You can control where the ink goes, whereas spraying them can be unpredictable. Again, nothing wrong with either method. I did spray some water down first just to make the application and blending of the inks easier. This step can be quite relaxing, just adding dabs of color here and there until you are happy with the result. I chose a combination of brown, light blue, and a green to try to create a distressed mossy stone. step you can do to really make the journal spread pop is to add some inking around the edges of the pages. This can really create a soft or dramatic frame depending on the color of ink you choose and how far inward you blend the ink. My go-to is usually ground espresso distress oxide ink pad, but it is also fun to experiment with other colors. Another amazing texture that you can add to your spread is embossing paste. It has the same look as embossing powder, but it is much easier to use. Embossing paste can also be applied through a stencil. This one I am using is a bronze colored embossing paste that I thought would work well on the spread together with this Gothic font stencil by Finnabair. I just added touches of this in a few spots. When it dries, it'll be super shiny and metallic. One of the best ways to finish off an art journal spread is with splatters. This time I'm using a dark brown ink and creating very small fine splatters just around the paper focal points. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.